t-shirts can you afford to give away? What's crazy is the lobby count just keeps going up. Like now it's at 30, or oh, it just dropped big time. But for a second it was at 31.
This happened on another webinar I was on with Club OS. Ooh, he said it's working at another place.
Oh, what the ass.
What does that mean?
Yeah, how do we get them all there?
Hey, ask him if he can get you the link. Just put the link in the chat box, and everyone can click on it.
He says the link's in the chat. Okay.
Man, that's hilarious. I was right. Maybe I should be the tech guy. I'm just kidding. I don't know anything about this stuff.
Let's see.
Hang on.
How do I need to get to it again? Are you on it on your phone?
No, I'm on my computer.
I need to get it to my computer because I can't pull it up on my phone.
Can Scott or somebody put, if one of y'all can put it in the Zoom chat, I can just copy it because I'm on my computer and I have to put it up.
I'm about to email to you.
Greg, do you want to let people know to follow that link? That's so bizarre. Oh, yep, there it is. Okay.
You put it on in the chat.
Yep, I'll put it one more time. Alright, I gotta mute myself.
Chris, I don't see where you put the link in. Like it's not showing up for me.
I put it in the chat.
Yeah, no, I'm on it now.
I did this.
I don't see it.
On my screen, it's showing directly underneath me. Oh, hey, is there a way that you could just email it out, like, really quick?
Yeah. Are we live doing this?
Yes.
We are?
Yeah.
Do I need to talk?
Yeah, let me mute myself.
I'm not gonna worry about emailing. We'll just have to tell people. We'll do a second one regardless. But I'm gonna put this because I can't see your link coming through, so I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. Oh yeah. Scott did it as me. All right, guys. It's probably a little bit of lag, so I'm gonna do the best I can here. Thank you so much for your patience. Um, this is our first time to do this on webinar. If you can't tell, but we appreciate you guys sticking with us. Yeah, so I've been teaching this class for a little over 2 years now, and I started doing it for the city of Plano, and then we've hosted it a couple times in our new classroom at Hidden Gem. And I want to introduce for you those of you that don't know Chris Prosser here. Hey, Chris. Chris is a certified trainer, 8 years. He's got his degree from Texas A&M. Spent some time training on the Texas A&M football team, and he is training clients out of Hidden Gym. And him and I are doing some. We work together with quite a few clients, and yeah, I'm excited to have him here to cover the nutrition portion of our presentation today. So, without further ado, Scott, if you want to kick on that slideshow, we will get this thing going. All right. Too many screens. Got to get used to this webinar stuff. All right. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the agenda yet. I got a little bit of lag here, but just to go over kind of the outline for the course, we're going to do a quick introduction, which is where we're at now. We're going to talk about why you would want to learn to build muscle mass. Then we're going to I'm going to cover the training section about everything that has to do with training and how to put on muscle mass. And we'll start with some advanced topics, but try to keep it surface level and easy. Then Chris is going to cover nutrition. We'll touch on cardio in respect to building muscle, a quick segment on supplementation and recovery, and then we will keep this thing open for Q&A. So you guys are welcome to write questions in. We've got the chat open here, so if you want us to expand on something, by all means, interrupt us, and we'll be happy to expand on an idea. Or if you want to save questions to the end, we'll stick around for some Q&A at the end. All right, next slide here. So quick introduction about myself. I've been a personal trainer for over 12 years. I carry 6 active certifications. I've trained just over 1,000 clients. I work hard to keep my continuing education up, attending workshops and seminars, at least a couple every year. I've been a gym owner now for 11 years, competitive bodybuilder for 14. I did a little stint in powerlifting. I earned a torn bicep trophy. Was the best thing I pulled out of the sport of powerlifting. I did do a little bit of triathlon as well. I've done some adventure racing, both on a motorcycle and off a motorcycle. And I would really say like a good amount of my training education has come from working with some of the top coaches in the world. So, you know, as a gym owner in Dallas, I've had the privilege to train with a lot of great athletes and be connected to some really great coaches. And that's, you know, on top of the educational side, that's where I built a lot of my hands-on knowledge that I take to my clients. So why? Oh, here, and a quick intro about what I'm not, because that is important in the social media era here. I do not have any related degrees. I have a degree. It's in marketing. Chris over here, he's carrying the muscle building degree. I am not a scientist by any means. I've never participated in any kind of research study. I would not consider myself an authority on the subject, and I don't consider myself an expert. So that's the front and center of what I'm not. Just so you guys know, you know, this is very much what I've learned as a hands-on athlete, hands-on coach, and who's studied, but not in a degree-related sense. So that's my quick asterisk for what I don't claim to be. All right. And here's Tana, for those of you that came via Tana's post. Thank you guys. And we gave away a shirt on your behalf.
Yeah, I sadly couldn't remember what year that was, but good job, guys. Go build some muscle.
And we gave away a shirt on your behalf. Great. So why do we want to learn to build muscle? A lot of reasons. Of course, we like the way that it looks, but it serves a lot of great purposes as well. It will boost your metabolism. This is one of the things I always tell, especially female clients when we first get started. Every 1 pound of muscle is going to burn 50 calories a day just by the fact that you have it. Which means if you put on 5 pounds of muscle, that's 250 calories a day that you'll burn just by existing. So it does boost your metabolism. It helps you maintain a healthy body weight, kind of by that function that you have an improved metabolism. It creates stability in your bodies. That stability will reduce your risk of injury. You will have increased strength, improved appearance. It's important, and this is another thing. Most men like generally want to put on muscle mass. That's not usually something they're concerned about, getting too muscular. It's usually on the female side, but you have to remember that what creates tone is lower body fat with increased muscle. That's what makes something look tight. That's what gives something shape. So if you want to be shapely and add tone, you are building muscle. So sometimes it sounds a little too hardcore for the women to want to put on mass, because that doesn't sound, who wants mass, right? That's just, don't get caught up on the vocabulary, but that is what creates those shapes. And for dudes, of course, that want to bulk up or stretch the shirt sleeves a little bit, we're talking about putting on muscle. Improve self-esteem. And one of the subjects I'm super interested in, and I do some work in this in the nonprofit world, and that is in the cognitive benefits of weight training. So there's a big connection and a lot of great studies going out there. I share a lot of them on Facebook because it's kind of new subject matter, but there's a big connection between weight training and exercise and the mental benefits, even to the point that some of the neuroscientists say that even if exercise did not change your body, what it does for your mind makes it fully worth it. So that's extremely powerful statement. All right, again, you guys feel free to write in questions, or if you'd like something expanded upon, just let us know, and I'm going to keep rolling through this presentation. All right, creating adaptations. This is what I would call square one, and this is a lesson that everyone always needs to learn. To make your body is an amazing adaptable machine, as I wrote it here. It will evolve to the circumstances that you put it in. You need to give it a reason to adapt, though. If you do the same thing every day, there's no reason for your body to make a change. This is true for adding muscle. This is true for losing fat. This is true for increasing your performance. This is true for building strength. You need to give your body a reason to add muscle mass. What would that reason be? You need to pick up something that once was heavy and make it where it gets easier. That's an adaptation, right? Like, does that make sense? I'm picking up something that's extremely heavy for me. I keep doing that time and time again. It gets, in theory, less heavy. That means your body has adapted to that stimulus, and that adaptation is muscle mass. Same with body fat. You need to give your body a reason to lose the body fat. If you're never in a calorie deficit, your body has no reason to pull that storage of fat and use it for energy. Same with performance and strength. You won't get stronger unless you tax your body to a degree that it's forced to make an adaptation. This is kind of an inverted chart. So we're going to talk from a very macro perspective all the way down to some very, very detailed things. So, and you don't need to memorize all of these. Again, this is a 101 class, and I want to keep it 101. But we're going to talk about, at least to have a knowledge of what these subjects are. So just remember, as I go through the next slides, we're going to go one step at a time here. We're going to start on a very big perspective and work ourselves down to the details. So starting with periodization. Um, Periodization is an advanced topic and likely something that most people don't need to worry about too much, especially in a beginner stage. But say you've been in the gym for a long time, like I've been kind of lobbying for people to take this class that have been in the gym a long time, but maybe have not had formal training. This would be one of those topics for that type of listener. Periodization really just refers to how one's training cycle is broken down into discrete time periods called macrocycles, mesocycles, and microcycles. So we're talking a macro cycle is 6 months to 1 year. Scott, if you can go to the next slide, it might just be delayed if you've already done it, but I have a periodization slide. So, and for those of you guys watching, don't stress that you need to write all this stuff down, because we're going to be emailing out the slides tomorrow. So a macro cycle, 6 months to 1 year. That means like if you're going to make plans, how should you phase your training over the course of a year? You can't put your foot to the pedal and hold it to the floor for a year straight. You're going to get hurt. You're going to have diminished return. You have to waive intensity. You need to take some breaks. You need some time of high intensity, low intensity. There's a way to plan your training over those bigger cycles. Those macro cycles are made up of mesocycles, which are 1 to 2 months at a time. So we're talking 4 to 8 weeks, which is likely like a training block that you would when we write our training for our clients. Usually they're in 4 to 6 week cycles, because many people, like if you just go to the gym and decide what I'm going to train that day, you're leaving a lot on the table, because you want to be able to create those adaptations. You want to be on enough of a structured program that you get good at that program so that you can start to really progress. If you change the exercise every single time, there's no rhyme or reason behind it, you're not going to be able to have the same progressions that you would want. A microcycle would be 1 week, and we're going to talk about ways that you can divide up your week. All right, we're on to training splits. I don't have a way to talk to Scott, but we need to bump the slides forward a little bit. Training splits. That's the way that you divide up training. There we go. Training across a set amount of days, usually across 1 week. So you probably have heard this if you've been around training at all. What's your split? Examples of a training split: total body would be one way to do it. That means you're training your entire body every time you go to the gym. Push-pull. Usually it's, push-pull legs is a pretty common split. All your pushing motions, would be like the chest muscle group, the shoulder muscle group, the tricep muscle group. Pulling would be your back and your biceps. Upper body, lower body, that's pretty self-explanatory. Body part splits, also known as the bro split. That means you are dividing your body up into, you have maybe a chest day. If you have a chest day, it's likely on a Monday. You've got a back day, a shoulder day, an arm day. So not traditional, but it's what many bodybuilders adhere to. And then you've got a split, and there's a way more splits than this, but just as an example, there you can have a split that's divided up by the lift. So for instance, a power lifter might have a bench press day where the bench press is the primary focus for that day, whereas they might have a squat day or a speed bench day. But anyways, the schedule is organized based on movement. So a couple examples that you guys might be familiar with. So we've got, I've got listed here a 3-day total body split. Scott, you can go to the next slide. A 3-day total body split. I like this split a lot. So you've got, and this is something that I really didn't believe in too much, and it was actually Brett Contreras and Tana that started using the total body split around 2007 16, and she got incredible results from it, and it kind of changed my mind on this whole thing. We've got a quick question here. Sorry, I missed this. How many easier segments would you need in a macro cycle? I'll work that question in, SF. I'll work that question into what we're talking about here. So a 3-day total body split, those can be extremely challenging. Like a lot of people think, oh, that's an easy split. Well, I can tell you the more advanced you are, the harder that split becomes. Because if you're an advanced lifter, just think about for a moment, if you're gonna bench press, shoulder press, squat, and deadlift all in one day, that's a hell of a day. Like if you're training at a high intensity, 2 of those lifts are usually like enough to feel like you got a workout, and then you start doing accessory movement. So that's a beginner split that you can take all the way to an advanced level. Then I also have on the screen an upper body, lower body split. I've got it divided up: Monday upper body, Tuesday lower body, a rest in the middle of the week, and then repeat. So this is a great split as well. I use this one a lot for females, especially because a lot of times guys want to focus more on upper body development, and it requires splitting up the upper body into more groups. But also, like even a male beginner can get a lot of work done, because in the beginning you have so much potential to gain strength that you can have a lower volume split and still make incredible results. So these are great for beginners all the way to advanced. Up next would be an intermediate to advanced split. So this has a little higher training frequency. And again, I usually, like, one mistake that I would say that I've gotten in this presentation over the years is I get to the end of the presentation and someone that's clearly not advanced wants to do the advanced split because they want to get there quicker. These aren't unadvanced splits. The first ones I showed you and this one you can be advanced and still do this. So you can take it all the way. It has a lot just to do with how it's done. So here's a push-pull, for example. You're doing upper body pull, upper body push. You've got a lower day and then repeat that pull and push. So a little more upper body volume in that split. And then here's a kind of a traditional bro split broken up by body part, with a rest day in the middle of the week and the rest day at the end of the week. And then these are some advanced splits. Again, this doesn't mean, I don't want to be misinterpreted. That doesn't mean that advanced athletes train like this. This is just something that only an advanced athlete would do. This is definitely not something a beginner would do. But I'll be honest, not a lot of advanced athletes train like this. But it has been done. I did this split with Steve Kuklo for about a year. I got good results initially, and then started to have a lot of joint wear and tear. So you have to be careful. There's some things to take into consideration, but a little sneak peek would be something like on the left, you've got a high frequency split, which is training 7 days a week. You really divide up the workouts as heavy workouts or lighter pump style workouts, but training every day. Or you can even train twice a day. Some people have done that for periods of time, which would be like a chest workout in the morning, back in the evening, quads in the morning, hams in the evening. So those are just some examples of some super advanced splits. So sorry, to get back to the macro cycle. Again, that's all about when you work in kind of a rest period, has a lot to do with what kind of training you're doing. If you're lifting super heavy loads and your goal is strength, you might find that you need what we call a deload week as early as every 3 to 4 weeks. Whereas if you're training in a more, and we're going to talk about rep ranges, but if you're training in a less taxing way, you might only need a deload every 12 to 16 weeks. So it really depends. But the fact that you do need to take your foot off the gas pedal is consistent no matter what you're doing. Okay, training volume. So I like to recommend workout times between 45 to 90 minutes. Outside of 90 minutes, and you're probably not being as efficient as you could be in the gym. So you want to we're going to talk about rest periods, but you want to stay moving in the gym. And anything over 90 minutes, and you probably need to evaluate how you're spending your time in the gym. Volume by weekly sets. So this is kind of my own formula here, just off of, based off of what I do for clients and for myself over the years. These are basically kind of what each body part, and these would be working sets. So a working set would be something that's nearing failure, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Whereas a warm-up set would not count towards this. So if you take 3 sets to get up to a weight where it's challenging, by my definition, that would only be 1 set. The ones leading up to it would be warm-up sets. So these would be working sets that you would do per body part per week. And then if you remember those splits, like if say you're doing a total body routine and you end up doing 12 sets of chest for the week, that might be 4 sets on Monday, 4 sets on Wednesday, 4 sets on Friday. Or if you've got a chest day, you might do all 12 sets on one day. And the weekly volume ends up the same. So these are just some kind of observatory numbers that you can go by. You can see that the back and the legs, bigger muscle groups can afford more volume, and a smaller group like the shoulders or the biceps or the triceps are going to have less volume. Okay, so how much weight do I put on the bar? That's always a great question, right? How much weight should I be using? Well, I like to work with clients off of what's called an RPE scale, rate of perceived exertion. I usually have to call on Chris to help me with my acronyms. I always jumble them up. But so this is basically an easy way for us to communicate how hard or how easy a set is, and it's a scale of 1 to 10. 10 usually meaning it failed. You were unable. If you take a set that was prescribed for 10 reps and you only got 9, that would be a 10 on the scale. If you got 9 reps, it probably means, or if you got 10 reps, that probably means like, but you barely got the last one. That would be what we would call a 9 on the RPE scale. So how do we pick weight? Well, you generally will have a prescribed rep range. So say that the program you're following or the program that you're assigned has, like we just said, a set of 10. So you want to if you're training to failure, then you would want to set a weight that once you hit rep 10, you fail. So it's going to take some judgment there. Or if I like to recommend that most sets be taken in the 7 to 9 range. You want to be careful on how often you take a set to failure, because, and as we talk about recovery and everything, we'll learn that you can fail too often. But also, I would like to reiterate that failure is essential. Remember, if we're talking about creating an adaptation, you need to pick something up that's heavy enough that it creates that you're not able to do it, and that's where your body is going to be forced to adapt safely, of course. But if you take, like, say, a leg press, that's one that's usually pretty safe because you've got stoppers, and you get to the point where you cannot finish the last rep. You don't want to do that too often, but that is something that would create a lot of the environment for muscle growth. Then I also have a progressive overload in here, which is a concept that basically means you're doing something heavier or harder than you did the week before, or the month before, or the year before. That's when you start to hear people talking about PRs. So if you were to track your weight, which is something I like my clients to do, we use an app so that they can keep track of their weights, and so I can view the weights. And you want to try to beat the, say it was the deadlift. You want to add, even if it's 2.5 pounds to your deadlift, just think if you add 2.5 pounds a week for 10 weeks, you've added 25 pounds to your bench press or your shoulder press or whatever. So that takes a little bit of discipline, but that is what we would call progressive overload. Okay, this next one is something that I learned really to work on. I think it's a lot of coaches do it naturally. The first person to really articulate it to me was John Meadows. So this is the order that you do exercises, and yeah, sorry, I'm stumbling on my thoughts there. So this is the order that you do exercises. So for instance, I put this example of a tricep push down and a bench press on the screen on purpose. So the triceps are required to bench press. Um, they're not the main mover. The main mover of a bench press is going to be the chest, and then a little bit of the shoulders, and then you finish the movement with the triceps. The chest is way stronger and bigger than the triceps, which means if you exhaust your triceps prior to bench pressing, you won't fully be able to train the chest because the triceps will fail before the chest is worked. So you want to generally work, and you can think about that in other body part scenarios. For instance, if you exhaust the biceps before a back workout, the pulling motion is going to be pre-fatigued to the point where you probably don't properly train your back because your arms are too tired. You guys have probably felt this, those of you that have trained a lot, maybe with your grip. If your grip starts to give out before your back, you're going to have to use straps in order to properly get a back workout. So you want to think about using primary movers first, using bigger muscle groups first, doing those compound movements early in the workout so that you can get the most bang for your buck with those compound exercises. Next slide here on exercise order. This is kind of how I like to, again, all of training and everything, I really respect. There is kind of one of the more authorities, the person I claim not to be in the beginning. One of the authorities on the subject is Brad Schoenfeld. And he phrased it in a great way at a seminar I was at last year. And he said, training is as much an art as it is a science. So you need to be able to tailor this stuff to yourself. And there's so many gray areas. There's so hard to find rights and wrongs. This is a way that I would look at a client. Let's see. I got another question coming through from SF. What comes first when training hams, glutes, and quads on leg day? Great question. I would say it depends on your goals. It depends on your weaknesses. And yeah, based on that. So for me, for instance, I'll talk about myself. That one's easy. I have weak hamstrings compared to my quads. So I usually train hamstrings first because that's my priority. When I'm fresh, I'm the strongest. I'm going to hit hamstrings hard, and then I'm going to squat. If someone's got great hamstrings and mediocre quads, or then they probably want to like really focus on quad dominant movements and then start to do everything else. This is especially important for females that want to grow glutes before everything else. So a lot of females end up their quads or thighs grow bigger than they want, and they really want to target the glutes. This would be when you would really want to start with glutes, make sure that they're maximally exhausted before you start doing stuff that's overly quad focused. So totally depends on the goal and what you're trying to do. And you want to take yourself fresh to the body part that needs the most work. All right, so again, on this exercise order, so these are like 3 buckets that I would put clients into. If you're, oh, sorry, Scott, go back one. I didn't hit that slide yet. Yeah. If you're healthy, or if you want to take an aggressive approach, you want to do a what I would call a dynamic warm-up, meaning it's not static stretching. You're warming up likely with the movement you're going to start with. So say that we're doing legs and you want to start with the hack squat. Warm up on the hack squat. And then that's going to be your main lift. That means when you're fresh, when you're your strongest, when you're ready to just get at it, you're going to hit that main lift. That means you're going to be able to handle maximum loads with that main lift. At that point, you would start to do secondary lifts like a leg extension, a leg press, a hamstring curl, and then move on to accessories. So in that healthy, more aggressive model, you're attacking that first movement with your most energy. One way to go about it for kind of a more longevity approach would be you would warm up, and then you would start with maybe a secondary lift. Say that you're doing, maybe you start with a leg press, something that is a little easier on your body than a squat or a hack squat. Maybe you start with an incline dumbbell press before you hit something like a bench press. So this would be starting with something that's a bit easier on the body. And then whatever your main lift that day is, hit second. And that allows the loads to come down a little bit, and you still get exhaustion in there. What does accessory work mean exactly? It means different things to different people. All my answers are always with it depends, right? So for a powerlifter, for instance, the main movement, or Danae, for instance, that's asking the question, and I know that we worked hard to get you stronger so that you could put on more muscle mass. Say that we were trying to improve your squat. The squat is your main movement. An accessory movement might be something like a lunge. It means that it's related exercises that are going to improve the main movement. If your grip work might be accessory movement, abs, core work would be accessory work, something that's going to improve the bulk of your lifting. All right, then if you're injured, this is so one technique that can be used, and I like to do it more around injuries than as a main method for building muscle, and that is the what's called a pre-exhaust technique. So the best way to explain this one would be if you were to start with say cable flies for chest. That's not a movement that I would consider a main lift. You can't handle maximum loads on a cable fly. It's probably something that you do later on in the workout. Unless you have an injury and you can't handle heavy loads, then you might use something like a pec deck or a cable fly to exhaust the muscle on purpose, so that when you go over to your main lifts later in the workout, you can't use very much weight. It's easier on the joint. So I don't think that's ideal if you're healthy, but it is a way to work around maybe an injured shoulder, injured elbow, injured knee. You can do that with legs, for instance. Like if you really worked leg extensions prior to squatting, you're obviously going to squat much less if you wear out the leg extension first. Okay, rep ranges. This is a good topic. Scott, we can bump over the next one. So if you're training in the 1 to 3 rep range, you're primarily building strength. You're not going to get a lot of hypertrophy or muscle growth in the 1 to 3 rep range. In the 3 to 6 rep range, you're going to get mainly strength benefits, but also some hypertrophy benefits. Hypertrophy means muscle growth. 6 to 12, that's kind of your holy grail of hypertrophy, but you're also going to gain some strength there. Once you start to get above that, 12 to 15, hypertrophy, not a lot of strength gains happening up there. You're going to start to build some muscular endurance. And then above 15, you're going to mainly be focused on muscular endurance, and you can get some hypertrophy in those higher rep ranges. So I usually do show of hands when I'm teaching this class in person. But at home, you can quiz yourself. Show of hands. Who can tell me what what rep ranges half Thor likely trains with? And then think about to yourself, you've got the Rock there, super jacked, probably really into hypertrophy or gaining muscle. What rep range does the Rock likely use? If you said that half Thor likes 1 to 3 reps, you're correct. And if you said the Rock likes 6 to 12 and 12 to 15, and probably the occasional 3 to 6, you would be correct. All right. Yeah, Devin, if you're guessing for the Rock, then you got it. Okay, let's talk about rep tempo. This one, I love talking about this one because this is my camera looks super like zoomed or something. Yeah, so this is something that I will bring up to clients, and it's like they've never thought about it before. So it's always kind of like a light bulb moment when we talk about this. So you've got 4 phases um, of the motion. So like it's hard to, I usually demonstrate this one. Let's see if I can do it. So say that we're bench pressing. You guys are on the edge of my bench press here. You've got the lowering phase, which is when you lower the bar to your chest. Then you're at the bottom of the bench press. And then you've got the part where you're actually lifting the weight. And then you've got the part at the top. So if you've ever seen this written, or if you want to just know what it is, one way to express those tempos are these charts here that I have listed. So if you see the bench press listed as 4-2-1-2, how you would perform that would mean that you would lower the bar with a 4-second negative. You would pause on the chest for 2 seconds, you would press for 1, and then you would hold it at the lockout position for 2 seconds. So it's always fun with clients because some clients naturally lift everything slow as molasses. Like, you know, they're barely moving the weight. And you ask them, why do you move it so slow? And usually they're like, I don't know. That's just how I always have done it. Or you've got clients that, throw the weight fast. Hey, why are you doing that so quickly? Oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to lift it. That's the things that often don't get thought about. So Scott, we'll go to the next slide. So the standard default that I teach to most people is a 2-0-1-0. So if you guys remember, that would be, I'll get my camera bench press out here again. That would be 2 seconds on the way down, no pause at the bottom, 1 second on the way up, and no pause at the top. So I like that because you want to have a controlled negative. One, it's safe, and two, you're much stronger on the way down. And that's actually where a lot of muscle growth can be gained, is by utilizing the lowering phase of a motion, which most people don't think about. A lot of times there's the conception that only the actual lifting part is what's productive, when it's actually, in fact, the opposite, that you gain sometimes more out of that lowering phase than you do with the concentric phase. So again, my standard is 2-0-1-0, meaning 2 seconds on the way down, you don't pause, and then you go up hard. And that's also something to say, that you want to push weight. This is a common mistake. You want to push weight with maximal force. So one thing I like to tell clients is, if you've got, say that you can bench press 200 pounds, but there's 150 pounds on the bar. Don't give 150 pounds 150 pounds of pressure. Give 150 pounds 200 pounds of pressure. So if you do that, what should happen? It should move really fast, because you're applying 200 pounds of force to 150 pounds of weight. So you have to be careful, because you want to create the adaptation, right? So if your body's just doing minimal effort to move what you hand it, that's likely not going to create an adaptation. You want to apply force, safely, of course, force with all your strength to the weight. And that's how you know if it's too light. If it moves too fast, you likely have it too light. Mixing in 3 and 4 second negatives is great for intermediates and beyond. A lot of advanced people train with long, like 3-4 second negatives all the time. Again, for putting on muscle. Training for sport is completely different and doesn't fit into muscle building 101. But training to put on muscle mass, taking 3-4 seconds to lower the weight can really do a lot of muscle damage, which is what we want. We want to tear the muscle down in the gym, and then we want to rest and recover out of the gym. Let's see. I already had that bullet point on here. I recommend pushing hard on the concentric, not slow. So that's a great slide. I hope you guys got a lot from that one, because there's a lot to take from that one, and something I did wrong for most of my beginning years. Okay, let's talk rest time. Oh, we're one ahead. Go back to the rest time slide there. So this one is usually pretty easily gender divided. I don't know what it is, but girls do not like to rest. They like to move, exercise to exercise, and that's fine. But let's talk about why we're doing what we're doing and make sure that your rest periods are suited towards your goals. Guys, on the other hand, have usually take longer between sets just naturally. That's what I found at least. Or maybe we should do personality types, like type A can't rest, and whatever the other types are can take all the time that they want. Anyways, so if you're only resting 0 to 30 seconds, this is where you're going to start to get more cardio. And yeah, Devin says that she doesn't rest between sets. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to listen closely to this one. So 0 to 30 seconds rest. You're going to get more cardio and metabolic benefits at as a type A female. That's a fact. That's funny. So cardio metabolic benefits with 0 to 30 seconds rest. 30 to 60 seconds rest, you're looking at more metabolic benefits. Once you get to 60 to 90 seconds, that's when you start to recover properly to gain, to really have maximal effort again in the set. 90 seconds to 3 minutes. That's, if you're resting 90 seconds to 3 minutes, you can really bring your best to the set again. And over 3 minutes, that's when you need that over 3 minutes if you're really trying to gain strength or doing some heavy CNS stands for central nervous system work. So one of the things that, especially you girls, if you want to get stronger, if you want to put on muscle mass, you've got to rest. If you think about, if I'm going to do a set of squats that's really hard for a set of 8, if you only rest for 30 seconds, what's the chances that you even get close to 8? Probably slim. And if you got 8 and you only rested 30 seconds, then you did not put enough weight on the bar. It was too easy to start with. So if you're really wanting to put on some muscle mass, you need to take 60, 90 seconds, 2 minutes to make sure that you can bring your best effort to the lift. It's the same with HIIT cardio, which I'm not going to get into that. I have a little bit of stuff at the end about cardio, but one mistake you see with HIIT training is not taking a long enough rest. And if you look at it's like, for instance, I have clients wearing heart rate monitors. If you look at your graphs, your peaks won't happen if you don't rest. If you shortchange the rest, you're going to shortchange the peak, meaning you're not going to be able to bring that maximal effort to the set. All right. You guys really responded. You guys you related to the rest period one. That was good. All right, let's move on to intensity techniques. I'll say on this slide, because this one's easier to handle in person, this could be difficult on the webinar here. If there is an intensity technique that you would like me to explain, go ahead and make note of that, and we'll cover that at the end. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of intensity techniques that you can use. Supersets, trisets, giant sets, partials, constant tension, pre-exhaust, slow negatives, reverse band, BFR, all kinds of stuff. If there's something in there that you don't recognize that you want me to explain, I'm going to save that to the end. Otherwise, this slide gets crazy sometimes. Awesome. And we are on to the nutrition segment of this. So at this point, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Chris Prosser. Hit it, Chris.
All right, really quickly, can you confirm that I am heard right now? Yes, no, maybe so. Greg, can you hear me? Okay. Guys, if you could just put like okay, cool. Looks like I'm coming through on here. I apologize in advance because I am tracking a little bit behind. I'm having to follow the pitch deck through YouTube. So I am behind. If there's any sort of awkward delays, I apologize in advance, okay? But cool, I'll do a quick intro for those of you guys who don't know me. Like Greg said, my name's Chris, and trainer at Hidden Gym. I do have a degree in this crazy world of fitness. I studied applied exercise physiology at Texas A&M. which is just a really cool way of saying I studied exercise and how our bodies move, adapt, and adjust to that exercise. I've been training for almost 7 years, so coming up on that marker, and worked with the Texas A&M football team as an assistant strength coach. And one thing that I want to mention before we move on is a lot of these topics I'm going to talk about are going to be higher level. And I'm going to pertain all this nutrition as it relates to muscle building, like, this whole presentation has been focused on. But if you guys want a little bit more of an in-depth explanation and a deeper look at nutrition, we are hosting our Fat Loss Nutrition 101 course. Date TBD, I believe. We haven't set a date yet, but that will be coming up, so keep an eye out for that. But cool, let's go on, Scott, to the first slide here. And guys, just like with Greg, if you have questions, type them into the chat, and I will stop as we go through here. So cool. So this pyramid, we borrowed this awesome graphic from Renaissance Periodization. And I thought that this would be a good way to kick things off, because when it comes to nutrition, and Greg would probably back me up on this, as coaches, it's the number one topic that we get asked about is nutrition. How do I eat to accomplish X, right? And I'm sure a lot of you probably fit into that category. You want to learn about nutrition. I think this graphic summarizes pretty clearly what it is that we should be focusing on, because most times we get caught up in the tiny details. And so let's start here at the base of this pyramid. It's kind of similar to the funnel that Greg posted earlier, right? With the more broad topics coming down to the more specific training topics. Same thing here. It's just right side up. So first off, we have calories. That is going to be the foundation of everything that we will do with our nutrition. It drives alone by itself 50% of all of the results that you'll see, whether you're trying to gain weight, lose weight, build muscle, burn fat, it doesn't matter. Calorie intake alone is going to drive 50% of that in those results. Next up will be how are those calories divided into macronutrients? That's going to make up roughly another 30% of your goal. Okay. So if you focus on those top two, you got 80% of the results right there. Next up, we'll have meal timing and meal frequency. Fourth, we'll have meal composition. So what are the actual foods that you're eating? And then finally, we have supplements and hydration. So in order, timing constitutes about 10% of the goal. Composition and supplements each complement about 5% each. So that gets us to 100%. And I'm going to save the right side of the pyramid until we get to the end of the nutrition section. But Scott, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, cool. So just some quick terminology here to make sure we're all on the same page. Calorie surplus versus a calorie deficit. Basically put, these terms are in relation to what we call a BMR, your basal metabolic rate. So how many calories does it take for you to stay alive and to function and to do things like build and repair muscle, okay? So a deficit is obviously when our intake is lower than the quantitative amount that we would need for those processes to occur. And to be clear, it obviously does not mean that if you eat in a deficit, you're going to die or evaporate immediately. It's not how it works. We have stored systems, which most of us know as body fat, to prevent us from dying if we go into a deficit. And then on the flip side of the scale, we have a surplus, which is obviously your calorie intake or your energy intake is greater than the requirements that your body needs in order to do something like build muscle. So I think it goes without say, but I'll say it anyways. With this presentation focused on muscle building, we're definitely going to be focused on the surplus side of the scale here. So Scott, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. We're going to talk about calorie intake and some markers that people can use. Okay. So there's a few ways that we can go about calculating how many calories should we be eating. And so I'm going to break those down for you here. First off, we have multipliers. I know this is a module that Greg uses quite often with his clients, and and we work together a lot on the back end with nutrition coaching. And so this is one way that you can go about it. This is definitely the simpler of the two ways. What we're going to do here, actually, let me start by defining these three terms that you see on the left: endomorph, mesomorph, and ectomorph. So an ectomorph is going to be the gal on the left-hand side of this graphic, going to be a little naturally, a little bit more skinny, maybe not carry as much muscle or fat mass. A mesomorph, think athletes. They have a pretty easy tendency to build muscle, and they don't carry lots of body fat. And then we have an endomorph, which would be the far right, and that would be someone who is maybe more inclined to put on fat mass. Maybe they can put on muscle easily too, but most of the time that's not the case. They're more inclined to put on fat than any other type of tissue. And an important thing to note here is that most people aren't only one body type. They're typically going to be a combination of the two. So maybe an ectomesomorph or a endomesomorph. There's certainly combinations, and most people fall on the spectrum. They don't fall into one of these categories. So it does make it a little bit confusing. And so here it's pretty simple. Once you identify your body type, you're going to take these multipliers out to the right, and you're going to use your body weight as the multiplication factor. Okay, and then we do have a note on here. If you're trying to lose a greater amount of weight, so 50 pounds or more, you should be using your lean body mass. So that just refers to all that you weigh minus the fat. Okay. If there's any questions, guys, please type that into the chat box. If not, though, we're going to go ahead and Scott take us through the next slide. Greg, am I going too fast, by the way? Good? Okay, sweet. Trying to stay on schedule here. All right, cool. So we have the second modality of, how do we determine our caloric intake? Now, this is the route that I go with my clients. And I know a few of them are here on the call. You can ask them if they had to do this when they first started with me. This is what I call tracking averages. And it's pretty simple, but it does take a little bit of homework. Ultimately, what you're going to do is for 7 days, you're going to track two things: your caloric intake and your fasted weight. So on this slide, we have a graphic of an example, and you can't quite see it because my beautiful face is blocking it. But we have the averages, the average calorie intake and the average fasted weight. And you can see that 0 down in the bottom right-hand side. So what we learned was, based on the average calories and the average fasted weight, this person who did this tracking, they were exactly at their maintenance levels. Now, I will say, full disclosure, this person got super duper lucky. And maybe or maybe not, it took me manipulating these numbers for a few hours to get it to come out to 0 exactly. But it's not always going to come out this way. But the good thing is that you can adjust based on, if your weight went up or your weight went down. It'll kind of let you know how far above or below you are when it comes to your maintenance calories. So this is the one that's usually tricky. So if you guys have questions about this particular module or modality, please, put them into the chat. But we will press onward to macronutrients. Alrighty. So macronutrients here, we're just going to do a quick, little definition so we're all on the same page. And there is a hot button topic that I want to talk about through this slide. So let's start off with protein. Protein could be simply thought of as the building blocks of tissue in the body. So when we're talking about muscle building, protein is definitely top of the list. It's what needs to be prioritized, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then up next, we have carbohydrates. Most people today, for some reason, think carbs are the devil. I assure you they are not. Carbohydrates are actually our body's favorite energy source. So when it comes to physical activity, even stuff like thinking or breathing, our body likes carbohydrates used in the form of glucose in our body, okay? And then we have fats, which which I like to call them the production and protection macronutrients. So they play two key roles: producing hormones and protecting our organs. So you can see here, and some people maybe on this have never even been formally explained what each macronutrient does. They just know them by name. You can see that all of them play a vital role, not just when it comes to building muscle, but just your general health. And so a hot button issue that I get asked about a lot, Greg gets asked about a lot, would be elimination diets, right? So we have ketogenic dieting, stuff like that, where you pretty much try to eliminate an entire macro from your diet. And I'm not going to go on record and say, if you follow that, you're crazy. But I am going to say, with the information, knowing of how important each macronutrient is and the role that it plays, I'll just sort of put it on the audience here to self-reflect and say, does it really make sense to eliminate one of those functions? Because think of your body as a chain, and the macronutrients are the chain links keeping it together, okay? So it looks like we have a few questions here, so I'll stop and try to get to some of those. So what are you comparing a 1 week average to? So you're taking the averages of that, and Scott, if you want to go back a slide, it may help just to sort of visualize this. It looks like it's paused on my screen. Okay, there we go. So you're tracking the calorie intake and the fasted weight. What you're comparing the averages to is one another. So you're comparing the average calorie intake to the average fasted weight. Now, if you could see on the averages side, and I don't remember the exact number here. Oh, there we go. So it's 2190. So there was a net change of 0. So what that tells me is 2190 pretty much dead on is my maintenance calories, which that's how I'm then going to determine a surplus or a deficit, right? That's sort of my landmarker. So you're comparing the calorie intake and the fasted weight against one another to determine where you're at in terms of your maintenance calories. Is there a difference when to utilize simple and complex carbs? Doesn't matter. That's actually something that we're going to talk about here in a few slides when we talk about meal timing. So Scott, let's go ahead and go past this slide to the slide that has the percentages. All right, perfect. So if you guys will remember from the pyramid, we had calories on the bottom. So it's the most important. 50% of our results will come from that. Next up was the macronutrient breakdowns. So these are some numbers. These are general guidelines. I wouldn't take these as biblical by any means, but these are just rough estimates and guidelines that are common. A lot of people use them. And so I won't talk too much about the exact percentages. And like Greg said, we're going to send out this deck. So don't feel like you have to write these down or anything, because you'll have them in your inbox tomorrow. But I want to focus on the 3 bullet points at the bottom. So since we're focused on building muscle, like I've mentioned already, protein is going to be absolute key. It is the building block of all tissue in our body. And so if you neglect your protein intake, it's going to be very difficult for you to put on any sort of muscle, even if your training is dead on. Okay, so that's the first thing. A good recommendation here, and this is going to range person to person, but 0.75 to 1 grams per pound of body weight, usually, especially if you're in a surplus, is going to be more than enough. Obviously, that range is going to change as you go into a deficit. Maybe you're in a fat loss phase, that range could go up a little bit. But since this is a muscle building course and not a get shredded course, we'll keep it with that recommendation for now. Nutrition. Yeah, exactly. I set my protein shake because it's key, baby. So nutrition should be matched to your activity. What we mean by that is all of these macronutrients here could be on paper more ideal for certain types of activities. So really quick example of that. If you are someone who, obviously you guys are interested in building muscle, that's why you're on the muscle building 101. So we'll use that example. If you're trying to build muscle, you're likely doing some form of resistance training, right? Progressive overload, like Greg talked about earlier in the presentation. Well, carbohydrates, like we've talked about, is our number one energy source, our favorite energy source to use with training. So maybe the low carb option here is not going to be ideal because it's not fueling and it's not matched to the activity that we're performing. Now, let's say if you're a triathlon runner, like old Greg here used to be back in the day, you would maybe want to consider, a higher fat diet, because fat burning actually peaks about 2 hours into activity. So if you're exercising for long periods of time, your body's likely going to rely on fat more than it is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are more so used for quick bursts of activity. Fats are going to be burned during something like steady state cardio, where you may be doing it for a longer time. Okay. Any questions on that? Feel free to put them down below. And then finally, just listen to your body. Now, this is something that I talk about in my fat loss nutrition course. And that is all of these macronutrient breakdowns, the percentages, they can drive you results. Okay. Especially if you're taking the first tip of focusing on protein, you can build muscle with all of those. What will be the difference is how well are you going to feel on those different breakdowns. Some of you may feel phenomenal on a lower carb diet. Okay. That's just the fact of the matter. And I can't explain it, but it's just, individuality. Some people respond better. And so listen to your body. My advice would be try, maybe those three on the last slide out, see which one you feel the best on. Which one do you have the best energy? Which one are you not food focused on? That sort of thing. And that's going to give you the best answer. All right, so we're on to macronutrients and composition. And I won't spend too much time on this slide. These are just a few quick, examples of the three macronutrients. As you guys can imagine, there's a lot more examples than this, but we didn't want to put 1,000 food options on the slide here. But these are just some, common examples. So Scott, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so I believe this is the last slide on the nutrient or nutrition portion of things. Nutrient timing. So thinking back to our pyramid, and I know it's kind of hard if you don't have it on the screen, but thinking back to it, nutrient timing contributes about 10% of our overall goal here. And as a coach, one thing that I see is people get so focused on maybe the things that are only adding 5 or 10% value into their actual results, and they don't do the other 80%. Okay. And so nutrient timing is important, but all of the other things that we've talked about so far, your calorie balance, your macronutrient breakdown, all of those things need to be in line before you get to a point where you're worried and concerned about nutrient timing. So I just want to preface that first. Okay. So a few considerations, what we're talking about when we say nutrient timing. One thing that's common is meal frequency. I know, Greg, you fall under the spectrum of people who believe in higher frequency meals, which is 100% backed by science. Other people believe in maybe having 2 or 3 bigger meals per day. Guys, I'll save you a lot of heartache here. This is going to be your preference, back to listening to your body. Intra-workout nutrition, we'll talk about things like Carbolin, a intra-workout carb source that you can drink, post-workout nutrition. These are all different considerations when it comes to nutrient timing. And now it may be more helpful if you guys have specific questions about one of those 3 categories that I could answer, because I think I could do an entire presentation on those 3 individually. So if you have questions, please ask them now before we move on. But those are the most common things that constitute nutrient timing and meal timing. Again, I want to drive this point home. When it comes to nutrition, listening to your body is going to be the most important factor. So you should be seeing a trend here. There's certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to your nutrition. It's going to come down to you and paying attention and taking detailed notes, or maybe, working with someone who can sort of observe for you in terms of what's going to work best. There's not a one-size-fits-all for any of this stuff. Oh, it looks like we had some questions come through. According to your experience, is the 40% protein, 40% carbs, and 20% fat giving you equal results with men and women, or different because of gender? That's a fantastic question. So thank you for asking that. Now you're going to have a hard time getting me to shut up. So I start all of my clients with a 40-40-20 split. Now, when it comes to gender, I do notice that my female clients typically they don't process their carbohydrates as quickly as men. So men typically are less sensitive to carbs as to where women are more sensitive. And that's just an observation on my end. Maybe that's not scientific, who knows? But I do notice my female clients typically have a harder time burning through carbohydrates. So I will adjust their carb intake to something to where we maybe focus a little bit more on protein and fats and take down the carbs. But yeah, in my experience, and Greg, if you want to chime in on this, there's certainly a difference between how men and women metabolize carbs. What about fasted training in the morning? I hate eating right before I train. So this kind of goes in with a hot topic here that I'm going to talk about before we move on. But, fasted training in the morning, for me personally, I couldn't do it. I would pass out, puke, or both. I couldn't do it personally. Again, it's going to come down to personal preference. Now, I will say, disclaimer, it's probably not optimal, but is it going to kill your gains? Probably not. Okay. So again, if training fasted is your preference and it allows you to adhere to your program, adherence is a word that you'll hear us say a bunch, then by all means knock yourself out. But I will say it's likely not optimal. Okay, Audra got a question here. Many people think you shouldn't eat after a certain time at night. Yeah, if you guys eat by the time this webinar is over, you're probably going to gain 15 pounds. No, that's a myth. A good rule of thumb that I communicate to my clients is, rather than saying, hey, I shouldn't eat past 8 p.m. or whatever, the myth is, it should be more so tied to the time that you're actually going to bed. So the reason that people say, hey, you shouldn't eat after 7 or 8 is they're assuming that you're going to bed at 9 o'clock. And it's not ideal to eat a meal where your insulin levels are going to be up and then you go to sleep, because then you start to inhibit some of the fat burning processes that happen while you're sleeping. So it's not a set time of night. It's more so in relation to when you go to sleep. And a good number there is you don't want to eat closer than about an hour and a half to 2 hours before you're going to lay down for the night. And something too that can help you if you happen to get in a pinch and eat later, you can take a quick 15-minute walk or 20-minute walk, and that will help bring your insulin levels back down to where they're not elevated when you go to sleep. So what would you recommend that's easy on the stomach before training? Greg, you could definitely chime in on here. This is a question that I asked you recently. It's going to depend on the person. I definitely would avoid high fibrous or high fat meals. So I wouldn't have 3 tablespoons of peanut butter before you go train. I like to tell my clients to have a well-rounded meal. And if you can't do a full meal, maybe just like a protein shake and a banana or something that's easily digestible. But Greg, if you have 2 cents on this, it'd be helpful to hear from you on what you think. I think
All right. Yeah, we're testing out a new screen mode here. Sorry, I wasn't ready. Yeah, easily digestible. I think cream of rice or oatmeal is my favorite, and really your goal pre-workout is to give you something that's going to be sustainable energy. So you want to stay away from things like, I know it can be kind of fun or funny to do, candies or cookies or something right before you train, because the thought is that simple sugars will get you a great pump. You want to remember that you want to try to have a sustainable energy and keep your blood sugar pretty stable for an ideal workout. So a complex carb, and that could be you know, that can be rice, that could be potatoes. I like cream of rice or cream of wheat. Obviously, if you're sensitive to gluten, then you want to stick with the cream of rice, usually with some protein, and like a little bit of added fat to help delay the release of all of that. So that's a nice and simple pre-workout concoction. Let's there's probably a lot of nutrition questions. Let's push those towards the end.
Yeah.
And Chris, if you want to touch up on adherence real fast, I know that we wanted to knock that out at the end of the nutrition, and
Yeah,
then
for sure.
I'll discuss cardio, and then we can save the rest of the questions for the end.
Yeah, sounds great. So here we go back to the pyramid. And so we covered all of these areas, right? And now we're going to talk supplements and hydration at the very end. But guys, the biggest takeaway here is whether you're trying to build muscle, lose fat, the number one, sort of deciding factor is not how frequently are you eating, not what foods are you eating, even it is how well are you adhering and how consistent are you being. Even the best written diets will not give you results if you're not adhering to the diet. So adherence, there's a reason that it covers this whole side of the pyramid, is because if you are 100% spot on with your maybe supplements and you even eat the right food, you have to realize that that's only 10% of the equation. You still have another 90%. If you're being inconsistent and not adhering to that, you're not going to see results. And so that's really the only thing here that I'll leave with on that slide. So Greg, back over to you.
Back over to Greg on channel 5. Danae, thank you for noticing our super cool transitions. This was part of our great webinar that we had such a hard time getting off the ground. Yeah, but I agree, it's cool. All right, so now we're going to talk about cardio, and cardio in respect to gaining muscle. And while cardio is not my favorite thing to do, this is one of my favorite topics of the presentation. So we will jump right into it. So again, we're going to go back to kind of how I started this presentation and talk about creating adaptations. So remember, your body adapts to what it's doing. And I kind of put, this is an extreme example, but we've got what is likely a championship marathon runner. You can see that this man's body has adapted to endurance activities in an extreme way. If he had muscle mass at some point, to whatever it took to be that good of a marathon runner, his body adapted by getting rid of it, because it just makes sense. Why would you want to carry that mass 26 miles in 2 hours or whatever? Same with fat. Like, his body has adapted to get rid of all excess weight so that he can be a good marathon runner. So this is what you have to think about. So for those of you that are trying to put on muscle mass, or gain muscle, or again, remember, don't let the terminology bother you, ladies. If you're wanting to add tone is a nicer way to put it, or shape, and you're doing a ton of cardio, your body's the adaptation that you're trying to create, you're cardioing it away. The adaptations of cardio is muscle loss. That's an endurance adaptation. So, and I think I wrote on the slide there, weight loss, remember, and weight loss doesn't discern between fat and muscle. If you just want to lose weight for the sake of making the scale say something different, that's much different and much less precise than changing your body composition. So if you just lose a bunch of weight, you might lose, if you say you lost 10 pounds of muscle, which, if you remember in the beginning, each pound of muscle is 50 calories a day to your metabolism, and you lose 10 pounds of it, that's 500 calories a day that your body's not burning anymore. So you want to make sure that your cardio program is in line with your goals. That's the moral of that story. All right, we'll go next slide. This one often gets confusing, and don't spend too much time on this one, but I'm going to just quickly define it. And if you follow me, great. If not, don't stress it. So there's two energy systems at play when you're doing cardio. There's aerobic cardio, which is below 80% of your max heart rate. Why we bring this up is that aerobic type work. Think about this is walking, this is a slow jog, this is easy cardio. Maybe we're on the elliptical at an easy pace. This is something that isn't you might be starting to get out of breath, but you're not huffing and puffing by any means. This uses a mix of air and fat and carbohydrates to fuel that activity. Then you've got what we call anaerobic exercise. This is sprints. This is weight training. This is a heavy sled push at a maximum intensity. This is like I said, a sprint. So something that's going to take more than 80% of your max heart rate. And this is important to know because this is driven only by carbohydrates and creatine. So you can't convert air or fat fast enough for anaerobic exercise. So when we're talking about matching your fuel source to your cardio, or why we talk about maybe why a low carb diet versus a high carb diet, remember, it depends on what you're doing. You want to eat fuel for the activity at hand. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So what are different types of cardio? Just keep all of that we just talked about in mind. And now we'll talk about different types of cardio. So you've got low intensity, steady state cardio. Just as the name describes, you're going one pace the whole time. The intensity is not very high. You've got HIIT, which I think you guys probably know is defined as high intensity interval training. You've got intervals. You've got Tabata, which is a form of HIIT with some strict timing, which I can explain that if we want to in the Q&A. I love Tabata, and I think it's awesome for fat loss and performance. So you guys, someone asked me a question about that one at the end, please. And then you've got sprints. I kind of put my own picture up here as a joke because it was a cool picture that I wanted. Jump rope, usually probably more of a HIIT type interval cardio. And to get in this specific condition, this was getting ready for a show in 2018. I did 0 of jumping rope or any HIIT cardio at all. It was all low intensity, steady state. So all for the gram, right? But there are different reasons for each one. And just in quick summary, let me make sure I don't have a slide coming up. Yeah, go ahead and we'll go to the next slide. I'll save this explanation for the next slide. So you've got what we call fat burning cardio. So there's kind of 2 ways to burn fat when you're doing cardio. If the environment is right, you can use fat for fuel and burn fat while you're doing the cardio. The other way to do that is to use the cardio to increase your metabolism and burn fat by being in a calorie deficit and by burning more, by being in an environment that creates fat burning more over like the course of a day or a week. So how do we do that? Fat burning cardio, as it's mainly defined as in a certain heart rate zone. So we're talking usually 60 to 75% of your max heart rate. It has to be slow enough that your body can actually convert fat into energy. If you go too fast, you're simply going to tap into your glycogen stores. And if your glycogen stores are empty, what can actually burn muscle mass. So some of the pros of a lower intensity cardio would be that it exclusively burns fat and that it preserves muscle mass. So you can be more pinpointed about what you're burning, what kind of calories you're burning. Another pro is that low intensity cardio does not impact your central nervous system, which means if you're training extremely hard and you really wanting to maximize the weight training, you have to be careful not to do too much hard cardio or else you'll start to have a diminished return in your weight training. The cons of this Low intensity is going to have a lower caloric burn, meaning if you want to burn very many calories, you're going to have to do it for a long ass time. The other con of fat burning cardio is that basically when the cardio session is over, you're done burning the calories. Like if you're going to take a walk or do a real slow jog, you're not going to get a lot of what we call afterburn. You're basically like the calories burned while you're doing the session stop there. So it's I'll save that concept actually for the next slide. But those are the kind of pros and cons of low intensity cardio. And you guys feel free to ask questions on that. Okay, intense cardio pros and cons. So the harder you push yourself, the higher the caloric burn. You know, the harder the work, the more calories it takes to make it happen. So you've got a high caloric burn kind of per minute if you're working harder. One of the biggest benefits of intense cardio is what is called EPOC, or excessive post-oxygen. What is it, Chris? You always have to correct me on this one.
Excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption.
Boom.
Not to be confused with TUPOC.
Not to be confused with TUPOC. EPOC, TUPOC, two totally different concepts. I always stumble on that one. But basically, EPOC is a fancy term for the afterburn effect, which means like when you're doing extremely intense cardio or HIIT cardio, as we like to do, or Tabata, you're gonna the bulk of the calories are not burned during the session. They're burned in the hours after the session because your body is trying to recover. It's in a state that's requiring calories to recover. So you can you might, if you use a Fitbit or something to monitor your calories, you might see like, okay, I did a light jog for 30 minutes and I burned 400 calories. And then you did a 10-minute HIIT workout the next day and you're like, well, damn, you know, I only burned 90 calories. That HIIT workout, while you might have burned less in the session, the net burn that's going to last for the next 12 to 48 hours is likely going to exceed what happened during that low intensity session. Cons of intense cardio: you can burn muscle mass if you're on a low carbohydrate diet. That does not fit well with intense cardio. If you guys remember from the kind of energy source topic, you can't convert fat fast enough to do a sprint. It has to use carbs or creatine in that it's an anaerobically fueled exercise. So if you're on a ketogenic diet, keto and HIIT don't mix well. Also, these intense cardios can negatively affect your resistance training. So if you are pushing it super hard in the gym, if you're on one of those advanced splits per se, and then you're trying to do intense cardio on top of that, you might start to get a diminished return. It might start to affect your weight training. All right, last cardio slide here. So ways to optimize your cardio. These are just some quick bullet points to get the most out of your cardio. Don't do cardio prior to resistance training. This is a common mistake, and I really can't, other than if you're trying to lose muscle mass, which we're not talking about in Muscle Building 101. There's really not a whole lot of reason to do this. You simply are going to burn the fuel that you need to weight train before you do the weight training. So not only, and you're going to use, basically, you won't get into any kind of immediate fat burning effect because you're just going to burn through your lunch. Say that you had a pre-workout meal and then you walk on the treadmill and then weight train. You're just going to burn what you ate, like those top glycogen stores will be burned off. So your cardio is likely not going to accomplish a whole lot, and then you're going to be less fueled for the weight training. Danae asks, when doing lunges with weights, my heart rate goes to red color. Yeah, that's, you can, that's common, and you should, if you're training really hard with weights, hitting the red zone is a good thing. Should I follow resting protocol previously discussed so my heart rate goes down to 60 before the next set? I wouldn't necessarily gauge heart rate for weight training. Just go off of time. There probably is a way to do that. That's just not a guide that I've ever really used. You should be able to if your heart rate's still at 90%, yeah, you should rest longer. But usually, and especially you, because you come from a running background, if you give something 90 seconds, you'll be prepared and ready again. All right, so don't do cardio prior to resistance training. Don't do too much intense cardio in the absence of carbs. We talked about that already. Low carb diets and high intensity cardio don't necessarily go hand in hand. Do low intensity sessions when stored carbohydrates are at their lowest. So here's a mixed school of thought, and I think Chris and I may actually be on little different parts of the spectrum on this one. But I've always prescribed to doing fasted cardio as one of the optimal ways to burn fat. Reason being is your stored carbohydrates are at their lowest, which means that you can convert body fat more easily into energy in the absence of carbs. So while the argument is that it's burning X amount of calories and you're going to eat that over the day anyways, I've found that in clients and in myself that the more depleted they are when they do that low intensity cardio, the more fat burning effect we're able to achieve. So the times that those are the most optimal would be first thing in the morning, immediately following the workout. And if you're on a low carb diet, like if you're not eating carbs, you're always going to be carbohydrate depleted, and you can pretty much always do good fat burning cardio. Lastly, do high intensity sessions as their own sessions or post resistance training. So sometimes HIIT workouts do great as a standalone session. You can also do those like immediately after you train. You wouldn't want to wake up and do a fasted HIIT session, for instance, because it requires carbohydrates. And to kind of go back to SF's question, if you're going to weight train fasted, or if you're going to do HIIT training fasted, again, like your body doesn't know what day it is. It's just going to know how much gas is in the tank. So if you're going to train before breakfast, make sure you carb load before bed. All you need to make sure that you have is stored carbohydrates to fuel the session. So if you're not don't want to eat breakfast, then you should have a more carbohydrate rich meal before bed. All right. Brittany says, is it okay to do fasted cardio in the morning and training in the afternoon, evening, especially for weight loss? Yeah, that's a tried and true kind of bodybuilding or body transformation schedule. You wake up, you do your cardio when your glycogen levels are the lowest. Then you eat throughout the day, building up those glycogen stores. Your body is prepared for weight training. It's got enough stored carbohydrates to really fuel a great session. And then you can hit the weights hard. And then even if you wanted to do an additional session, like sometimes people get into 2-a-day cardios, I usually have to do them at some point to get really lean. You can add that second session afterwards. Yeah. Let's see. Great. All right, we'll go to the into supplements briefly. I'm just going to touch on supplements and rest and recovery, and then guys, we'll stay on just a little bit longer for some Q&A. All right, supplements. So to bring back the chart, remember that your calories, your macros, the timing of your meals, what you're eating, all of that comes into part kind of prior to, like, supplements is the tip top of your results. So just keep that all in perspective. Again, like, remember, training, nutrition, rest and recovery are going to be 98% of your results, and the supplements are just a little bit added to that. They're a supplement to what you're doing. So I kind of like to break supplements into, we'll go to the next slide, supplements into two segments. We're going to talk about health supplements briefly and sports nutrition. So there's kind of two categories here. So health supplements, these are going to be supplements that are aiding in your overall health and aiding in maybe making sure that you've got enough micronutrients, right? Like if you want to build muscle mass or even lose fat, deficiencies can throw you off that trail. So a multivitamin, multimineral is a great basic supplement staple to make sure that you're getting your micronutrient profile taken care of, especially for those of us that eat similar foods day in and day out. This is important. Fish oil, great for inflammation, great for joint health, great for cholesterol, great for your heart. One of the health supplements I always recommend at a minimum. Joint support is great, especially for those of us, putting stress on our joints. Digestive support, this could be probiotics, this could be gut health products. There's a lot of different things that will affect your results, or that you can optimize results by taking care of your digestive system. And of course, you can go like 50 bullet points deep on health supplements. These are just kind of your basic 4 categories that I like to address at a minimum. And then we're on to sports nutrition. So sports nutrition would be supplements that are related to enhancing your performance. Whey protein, I almost don't even call a supplement. It's like I almost consider that part of your diet. But a whey protein shake is a great addition. I like whey protein isolate myself. Amino acids, you can do branch chain amino acids are popular. Essential amino acids are popular. I like drinking essential amino acids during training. It prevents the breakdown of muscle and can also start the recovery process. Carbohydrate drinks are something that, when we're talking about intra-workout nutrition or post-workout nutrition, carbohydrate drinks can be used. Pre-workout drinks are great to create an environment that's, one, it can get your kind of energy levels topped off with caffeine and other herbs and stimulants. And then it can also, provide you that little bit of energy right before the workout starts. Not on like a stimulant energy, but like creatine, for instance, is a fuel source used during training. Creatine is the most studied sports supplement, hands down. There's more studies done about performance and muscle growth on creatine than anything else. So it's definitely like a staple for most people trying to build muscle. Again, like, guys and girls, I do think that both genders can use it, dose dependent. Brittany asked about opinion on CLA. CLA is great. I think it's a great fat burning supplement, something I always use with pre-contest clients. I kind of use, like, I always tell people, like, you want to do kind of hit things in phases when it comes to, I'm going to get into fat loss too much, but hit thing in phases when you're losing fat loss. Like CLA is one of those things that I throw in when we've been dieting for a little while. We've increased the cardio a little bit. Now let's start to sprinkle in those extra 2% things. And CLA for me is like one of those extra things, when other things start to slow down. Big difference between branch chain and essential amino acids. Yes, there's quite a big difference. I believe there's, it's been a while since I read the textbook here, but I believe there's 13 essential amino acids. Branch chains is 3 of those. So if you're taking essential amino acids, you're taking branch chains by the fact that they're part of the essential amino acids. EAAs have become more popular. In kind of layman's terms. They can not only prevent the breakdown of muscle, but they can also kind of kickstart the recovery at the time of training. So that's why I like EAAs during weight training. Benefits. Oh, that was a 2-part question. The benefits you get intra-workout. Yeah. So the big benefit with EAAs being that you can actually kind of kickstart recovery at that time, and also they mix well with. I like to do carbohydrates along with the EAAs. One, it helps it deliver, and also like there's some benefits with blood sugar and insulin during the time. That's a whole topic in and of itself. But yes, there's a difference. When it just comes to cardio, branch chain amino acids are sufficient in my opinion, because you're only trying to prevent muscle protein breakdown. Then we've got beta alanine is kind of your second most proven muscle building sports supplement on the market. Danae says, is it a good idea to buy only one supplement that has all of them, or does it compromise the quality, or better to buy them individually? It depends. Like pre-workouts, there's usually like a lot of ingredients in a pre-workout. That's a great blend. When it comes to just like a creatine product or a glutamine product, usually I like to just buy the ingredient itself. One quick slide on hydration. This is a new slide that we added. So we'll go to the next one. So hydration, again, is at the top of the pyramid. Zeke is obviously so hydrated that he can spit his water out. He has enough to spare. But the human body is 60% water. Muscle tissue is up to 80% water. So that kind of gives you an idea of how important it is to make sure that your fluid is coming in. So if you don't drink enough fluid, what happens? You start to get dehydrated. Let's take a sip of, Chris just took a sip of water. I'm gonna have some too. What happens when you get dehydrated? You decrease the amount of sweat. Your body doesn't want to spare that water, it needs it, so you don't sweat, which can cause a raise in temperature. This is particularly dangerous or negative if you're exercising outside or in heat, for those triathlon runners we've talked to. You also get a decrease in blood volume, which there's a lot of correlation between the pump and actual muscle growth. It's not just something that feels good like Arnold used to talk about. It does have an effect. So if your blood volume is low, you're not going to be able to pump as much volume into the muscle when you work out. You actually burn through more muscle glycogen when you're dehydrated, and you have an overall performance decline, and it's sharp. I think I was talking to an athletic trainer recently, and he said something along the lines of a 2% percentage drop in hydration relates to something like a 20% performance decline. So it's pretty steep. If you're dehydrated just a little bit, the performance decline is pretty profound. And you can take, like, I like to do electrolyte drinks. There's all kinds of hydration formulas out nowadays that are really, really good, and can be good measures for performance. One simple way to tell if you're hydrated is the color of your urine. Obviously, the more clear that your urine is, the more hydrated that you are. And then obviously, like if you're taking supplements, that can throw that off briefly. But one simple way to do it is to look at the color of your urine. And then also listen to your body. Just the simplest advice is to drink when you're thirsty and pay special attention to hydration around the workout. So consuming more water before, during, and after workouts when you're sweating, that's the most important time, especially if you're going to exercise in heat. All right, last one. We are racing towards the end here. Last slide here is on recovery. So again, the whole process of building muscle and creating this adaptation, you got to do something hard enough to make your body adapt. And then after you do that, the actual muscle growth happens when you're recovering. So the bulk of recovery has to do with nutrition, supplements, hydration, and sleep. We've talked about nutrition, supplements, and hydration. Sleep is extremely important when it comes to both building muscle, losing fat, and functioning cognitively. So optimizing sleep is a popular topic and probably a seminar in and of itself. But obviously getting 6 to 8 hours, usually girls require more than guys. And there's a lot, it's a super interesting topic for those of you interested in it, but really making sure that you stick to your circadian rhythm, meaning like you're not staying up way past the sun goes down or waking up either way before or way after the sun comes up. Your body regulates hormones based on the sun. That's why travel can be so taxing, because you get out of that rhythm. So like I said, a topic in and of itself, but it's very important to recovery. Active recovery is simply like, very light yoga or taking walks, things that don't tax you more than what you're doing, but you can recover while being active. Cryotherapy is a cool form of recovery. It's basically like an ice bath, that instead of sitting in it for 20 minutes, it only takes 3 minutes. I love cryo. I'm a big cryo fan. It's like I said, it's ice baths are, have been used in the Olympic athletes for years. Cryotherapy is kind of the tech version of that, and you don't have to get wet, which is a big benefit. It gets down to like above -200 degrees, but it's only for 3 minutes. Massage therapy is great. Yoga, and when I talk about yoga and recovery, you need to discern from the difference between like that, like intense, like dancing, cardio type yoga, and the slow stretching yoga that really helps your nervous system and your muscles unwind and relax. Normatec sleeves are great. Those are awesome, especially on the legs and hips. For those of you that have used those, or if you haven't used them, take a look into those. And then just reducing stress from lifestyle factors, plays a big part in your ability to put on muscle and burn fat. So with that, that is the end of our presentation today. I'm going to say we'll leave about 5 to 8 minutes for questions here. And you guys don't be shy. Chris, if you've brought any questions to the table ahead of time, we can dig into those now. But let's throw us on the split screen view, and we can field questions here for a couple minutes. And like I said, we'll send this slide deck out tomorrow, and then also Chris is going to send out a link if you guys want to book a complimentary 15 to 20 minute Q&A call with Chris. Then you can book those with him, and if you want to ask a question maybe on how that pertains to you, because again, we talked in general senses here. We talked a lot about just general theories, and all of this stuff has to be personally applied, which is kind of where the art comes into. So if you guys have a question about how this pertains to you personally, then you can book a call with Chris starting tomorrow. Chris, you got any questions you want to start to throw into the tip jar?
Oh man, I got so many questions. My Instagram DMs just stay flooded. A question that I get pretty often is, like when people talk about intra-workout, so we talked about meal timing and all of that already. People say, if I'm taking an intra-workout carb, do I necessarily need to have a post-workout carb as well? Or does the intra-workout carb serve as my carb source and I can just have protein? Oh. So that's a question I get, more often than one may think. Yeah. It's a pretty specific question, but I get it a lot. So if any of you guys have thought that before, or Greg, do you want to take the first whack at it?
I'll take the first whack. And we had, Devin was asking questions about intra-workout nutrition, so I think it's a good one to bring up. I'm under the train of thought that, you're replenishing carbohydrates during the workout if you're drinking carbs during the workout. So at that point, the post-workout nutrition or post-workout kind of carb load becomes far less important, right? Like the big post-workout carb surge is more important if you've been depleting glycogen for the whole workout. So I myself, and what I have my clients do is if we're doing intra-workout carbs, I'll have them drink, depending on their body size, anywhere from 20 to 80 grams during the training session, and then eat a whole meal within an hour after training. So it's kind of the anabolic window becomes less important when you're doing that. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Whenever I have people do something like Carbolin, I personally still have them do some sort of carb after the sense, because I try independently of performance benefit versus recovery and growth benefit, right? And so what I mean by that is I have the Carbolin in to help them sustain performance, and then I give them that post-workout carb to help more so with the recovery. And if they happen to dip into the stored glycogen, we can go ahead and replenish that post-session. But I think, again, this goes back to the pyramid. That's a small detail. So if you're stuck on that and you're eating the wrong amount of calories, you're focused on the wrong thing. So that's the takeaway from that.
Yeah. All right. Question from Devin. I want to grow mass on my delts. Would it be counterproductive to train them more often? Gigantic, it depends question. Can you overtrain your delts? For sure. They're tiny muscles. Like if you just like think about the size of, your front delt compared to the size of your quadricep, you can obliterate the front delt pretty easily. So you can like increasing frequency or volume in shoulders is a great way to improve your shoulders, but you just have to be careful not to overdo it. And that what's overdoing it for you is probably a great like personal question because there's a lot of like information needed. So for instance, like just a couple general advices though, like if you're doing a lot of chest pressing, especially incline pressing, likely you don't need a lot of front delt work specifically, especially if you're doing a lot of shoulder pressing as well. So the more pressing, like heavy pressing you're doing, the less front delts that you need. Depending on your back work too, like you might be getting a good amount of rear delt work with back and you may only need to touch rear delts. I've also noticed in myself and in clients that, progressive overload on shoulders can be dangerous because it's kind of a fragile joint. So doing a lot of like intensity techniques and supersets and giant sets for shoulders can really help create that round bubbly look without doing a lot of damage to the joint. So that's one of those muscles that I like to hit with volume, but less intense, meaning like if we're on the RPE scale, you're probably not going above an 8 all that often on shoulders. It's going to be hard because it burns, not because it's so heavy that you're doing, low rep sets. Chris, any adds to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much covered everything. I agree. It's not counterproductive to train them more often as long as you're recovering properly. I guess one thing I would add is to think when you think of training frequency, you can sort of think of it instead of saying, hey, I'm going to train my shoulders 12 sets 3 times per week now. Because if you could do that, I mean, I would love to have your genetics. But instead of thinking of frequency that way, think of frequency as a way to further divide up your volume, which is going to allow you to increase your volume over time. That's probably the most important thing. And that would go for any muscle group, but especially the smaller ones like your biceps, triceps, delts, the smaller muscle groups that can recover quicker and typically handle a higher workload. Think of frequency as a way to expand your volume, not necessarily to repeat the same volume every single session, if that makes sense.
All right, next question here. 2 questions in one. I have almost more muscle on my upper body than I want right now, but I'm still trying to build my lower body. Would changing rest times and rep ranges help with this kind of thing? Yeah, you got it. You have a great understanding of what we talked about. You almost want to de-optimize your lower body training, right? So, if you're going to train, you kind of have 2 routes to go. If you want to get stronger, you could really lower the reps, meaning like you could do heavy squats and just keep or whatever exercises, RDLs, whatever, and keep the reps really low. You're not going to put a lot of muscle mass on if you're training in that below 5 rep range. However, I will say if you do that for very long, you're going to have a lot of potential for growth, which means like the fact that you got stronger means that your legs are kind of ready to grow if you up the reps. So what most people that I don't want to get their legs bigger is training really high reps and not a lot of rest. So almost turn it into more of an endurance cardio type session. So you're doing high reps and low rest periods. So kind of like de-optimizing the workout for muscle growth. And that'll help you like maintain the shape without really adding a lot of muscle mass on. And then you asked my question about Tabata because I wanted to talk about it. So Tabata is a form of HIIT cardio where you do a 10-second sprint, 20-second sprint, sorry, with only a 10-second rest period. And you do that 8 times. So you have to think about that for a second. You're going maximum intensity for 20 seconds, which is a long time to hold maximum intensity. And then you only rest 10 seconds. So it's a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio. And it is so hard. It is the hardest. It only lasts 4 minutes if you think about that. 8 rounds of 30 seconds. It only lasts 4 minutes, and it is so hard. But the afterburn effect you get from a Tabata session is awesome. So it's a great tool for cardio conditioning, and I believe it's a great tool for metabolic improvement. You got anything on the leg question, Chris, that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think one thing that is important to know is when it comes to maintaining your muscle, you can actually maintain muscle mass with half the volume that you use to get that muscle mass. So if you typically train at 12 reps or sets for your legs, you could cut that in half and you're going to maintain your muscle. Then what you can do is you can sort of reorganize that extra volume into the muscle groups that you're trying to grow, if that makes sense. So you're pretty much taking your resources and reassigning it to the muscle group that you're trying to grow.
Yeah, great point. Great point. On the Tabata timing, so you probably don't want to go to the gym for a 4-minute workout, but I would do the Tabata like immediately post lifting, or if you are kind of focused on cardio, you could go to the gym and do warm up, do 1 or 2 rounds of Tabata, and then if you wanted to do your steady state cardio following the Tabata, that's a great way as well. So I like clients to do that sometimes because it's like, okay, we'll do the HIIT or the Tabata work to kind of empty out that glycogen store, and then you can go do the low intensity work to maximize, how you can convert fat for fuel.
I don't know, Greg. Some people may go to the gym for a 4-minute workout once they open back up.
Yeah. Good luck doing Tabata in a mask, though. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much for attending. We're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. So like I said, we'll send these slides out shortly. Yeah, and you guys feel free to reach out to us with further questions. Chris, you got any parting words?
No, we'll be sending out the deck tomorrow. And like Greg said, if y'all want to schedule a complimentary call, if there's some questions maybe you didn't want to ask publicly, that call would be a great time to do so. And hopefully we'll see you guys very soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.
See you guys.